Valentine's Day is upon us, which means it's the time for chocolates, flowers, and pretty much anything love-themed you can find. And we wouldn't be a YouTube channel without doing something romantic for this time of year. Ignoring the fact that the last time we actually did do something like this, it was almost 2 years ago. That being said, I'm actually somewhat of a romantic myself, enjoying stories that pair characters together as the focus, though I'll usually enjoy a little sprinkling of fantasy into the mix to really give me something to sink my teeth into. And when it comes to the question of what I would want to watch to give me that mix of fantasy, fun, and romance, especially during this time of year, there's one great movie that immediately comes to mind. The ever-wonderful classic, The Princess Bride. Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am your ever-friendly Pokeprof, and welcome back to Fascinating Fiction. So, I'm not going to be mincing words here. The Princess Bride is one of those cornerstone movies when it comes to me and my family. It's something that's quoted, referenced, and even joked about constantly. But even with this familiarity with the film, it's actually been a good few years since I've sat down and watched it. And I've gotta say that doing my research on the film has given me a new respect for things. Originally a book created by William Goldman, this is one of those rare instances where the screenplay was also written by the author, actually writing both of them at the exact same time. Between the popularity of the book and his own enjoyment of his work, Goldman had been trying for years to get it made into a film. Apparently, it had been bought and sold several times to different companies over the years, never quite getting anywhere until Rob Reiner, the movie's director, was able to get the backing to be able to try his own crack at it, becoming what we know of it today. We start off the film by finding a young boy sick in bed playing video games. His mother comes in to check in on him before telling him that his grandfather had come by to cheer him up. And though it doesn't really amount to anything, it was re-watching the movie for this episode that made me realize this takes place during Christmas. Not only do we see a Santa decoration in the kid's room, but we also see snow and Christmas decorations outside. It's a subtle bit of choice that helps build the movie to make it more real, and it's something that we'll be seeing a lot throughout the film. To cheer up his sick grandkid, Granddad here has brought him a book, one that has been read to sick family members for at least 3 generations. This is actually a fun little nod to how Reiner got introduced to the original book himself, his father gifting it to him. He convinces the kid to let him read it despite the lukewarm interest of it being a book, because even back in the 1980s, books simply weren't cool. This is where we learn that the parts where Grandpa and Kid here are mostly being used as a framing device, occasionally with us cutting back to them to give us moments to breathe throughout the film, while also showing the impact the story will be having on the kid. The rest of the movie takes place within the story of the book itself. We then get introduced to our main leads for the film, Wesley the farm boy, played by Cary Elwes, and Buttercup, who will become the titular Princess Bride, played by Robin Wright. The first few minutes that we get exposed to these two does perhaps one of the best jobs I've ever seen in making us believe the characters here are in love. There's been other movies where I never believed the couple on screen had any interest in each other at all, the chemistry being so absent from the scenes that it felt flat on its face. But even with this movie telling us word for word that they're in love, both actors are able to give us that feeling of a young couple who are head over heels for each other just by a few simple looks and, of course, the movie's iconic line.
As you wish.
Of course, you can't have a romance story without drama, so Wesley's off to go find fortune in the world, only for word to come back that he died thanks to the dread pirate Roberts. Buttercup is emotionally destroyed and simply lists through life until 5 years later, where she happens to get promoted to princess thanks to Prince Humperdinck taking an interest in her, stating that they're gonna get married. Huh, and imagine that. She didn't even need to complete an ancient spell that screwed with her friends' minds to do it. Though I've got to ask seriously now, would it normally be allowed for a prince to marry a commoner? Like, I get it's a common thing for us to see in fantasy stories, but I'm not actually sure about the logistics in reality. Not loving Humperdinck at all, Buttercup spends most of her days leading up to the wedding riding on horseback, where eventually she meets up with our film's main conflict. 3 men that are here to kidnap and eventually kill Buttercup to help start a war between Humperdinck's kingdom and that of their rival kingdom across the sea. And let's be entirely honest, they're all played excellently by their actors. Mandy Patinkin as the Spaniard fencer Inigo Montoya, Andre the Giant as the gentle but imposing Fezzik, and Wallace Shawn as the intelligent Vizzini. We actually get a few good minutes of them really just fleshing out who they are, with Fezzik and Inigo showing to be mostly just there doing jobs that they were hired for, while Vizzini is actually shown to be the more bloodthirsty and violent of the group. This is where we see some of those more subtle and understated elements of the story really start beginning to build upon each other as we get to the Shrieking Eels, a known danger of the waters they're in. Not only does this serve to really let us see that this is a fantasy world that has been given a little bit more magical elements, but it's also to remind us of our framing device as we cut back to the grandpa and kid, even having grandpa reread a part of the book before finding his place again.
You read it already?
Oh my goodness, I did. I'm sorry. Beg your pardon.
Huh. Why does that sound so familiar to me now?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bother you.
Holy crap, it's Columbo! That's why the grandpa was so familiar to me. I never noticed this before because I only just got into Columbo thanks to a friend of mine, but I can see a lot of those same mannerisms now that I know of the connection. Peter Falk really had a special way about him, didn't he? It's as we get to the Cliffs of Insanity that the world building of the story really starts taking shape. We are now being introduced to these different events and trials that our characters must go through. The cliffs are such a well-known landmark in this world that Vizzini thinks that they'll be able to escape scot-free, only to be shocked when the Man in Black continues to do things he thought to be impossible otherwise.
He didn't fall? Inconceivable!
This is where our focus shifts over to the Man in Black, as he now has to deal with each of our villains as a trial he's got to overcome. First up is Inigo, showing how honorable he is not only by helping our masked man up the cliff,
I hit with him,
but also letting him rest and recover before dueling him, wanting a fair and challenging fight. We also learn Inigo's own backstory about his search for the six-fingered man that killed his father. It's actually interesting to know the fact that Patinkin and Elwes both learned how to fence specifically for this scene, with the entire fight barring one moment being done completely by the actors. And it's a fun one too, each of them complimenting each other throughout the fight as if they were friendly rivals before the Spaniard is defeated. Now, I'm wanting to bring special mention to the area in which our characters have been fencing this entire match, because it's something that I didn't really think about before when it came to watching this movie. And that's just how noticeable it is that they're doing everything on a set. Part of this simply comes from the age of the film. Between computer graphics, editing, and just overall skill, a set from an older movie like this one is gonna be a lot more obvious than one would be when it's used today. But it's never something that I ever really noticed before, nor do I ever hear people talk about it. And the fact that I never noticed it reminds me of what Linkara once said from his History of Power Rangers.
Something that people often forget is that you don't need great special effects in order to carry a great show or movie. The audience is willing to suspend their disbelief because the story is good.
And he's right. While there are some movies that are wonderful because of their special effects, sometimes it's the passion in the acting and the enjoyment of the story that can make us suspend our disbelief when those elements are lacking. exciting, and I feel like this movie does a great job in immersing us in the world despite the simple sets and limited effects. It's the fight against Fezzik that really hammers into the audience that neither him or Inigo are bad guys, just people down on their luck doing a bad job, both characters carrying on a casual conversation even as they duke it out. This is further shown by the fact that our masked man doesn't kill either of them, simply knocking them out before moving onward. Vicini, on the other hand...
Never go in against a Sicilian when death is on the line!
After this point, we start getting a mix of exposition and more subtle world building as we see Prince Humperdinck start tracking down everyone, while the Man in Black explains that he is the dread pirate Roberts. The movie starts to build onto that not everything is completely right with the prince, while allowing Buttercup to truly display some more emotion at the person who destroyed her life so horribly. Of course, life has a funny way of throwing people curveballs.
As you wish.
Oh, my sweet Wesley, what have I done?
Yep, Wesley was our Man in Black the entire time, which finally gives us a reason for his actions throughout the film. But this is where we've come to probably the biggest negative for the entire film for me, and one that I really noticed watching it again. The large amount of exposition for the characters. Now, I get it, we've only got a 98-minute runtime. You can't show the full 5-year growth of our main characters from then to now. But it's really about here that it becomes apparent, where we're spending a good couple of minutes of Wesley just telling us what he's been up to since the start of the film, and he's not the only character to do so. That said, now that I stop to think about it, there's some sort of feel that this movie has been giving me while rewatching it that I can't really quite place. What is it exactly?
Rodents of unusual size? I don't think they exist.
Oh god, now I realize what it is. The Princess Bride is a Dungeons & Dragons campaign. No, really, think about it. We've got a farm boy who leaves the love of his life, going and becoming a pirate through his backstory. He's gone through boss fights by defeating a swordsman, a giant, and a scheming genius. And now Wesley is fighting giant rats in a swamp on his way to escape from a corrupt prince, which, yes, Humperdinck is corrupt. We're going through an adventure of a level 5 D&D hero. We just need the little Muppet mentor for our group and we're solid. To save Wesley from being struck down after they exit the swamp, Buttercup gives herself up to Humperdinck. Being the villain he is, though, the prince goes back on his word to let her lover free, knocking him out and locking him down into the pit where he'll be tortured. This is the part of the film that becomes a bit harder to take seriously, as we meet an albino who talks about the machine, a devilish creation used by the six-fingered man in his lifetime study of pain. It's a silly idea of a machine that's basically a bunch of suction cups that drain away the years of your life, but we don't even think about it because of how seriously the movie treats it, even having Wesley crying after having a single year stripped away. The tone of the movie is making something that would otherwise be silly something to be feared. This is further supported by the nightmare Buttercup has of being married to Humperdinck, where we get this old woman heckling her for marrying someone that wasn't her true love. It would be something that's laughable if it wasn't for how serious the movie was presenting it to us.
Boo! Boo! Boo!
And there you are, ladies and gentlemen, the true nightmare for us YouTubers. From here, we move on towards the end of the film, with Humperdinck trying to set things up as much as he can for his possible war. This includes clearing out the thief's force nearby, and going out of his way to kill Wesley by having the machine drain his life entirely, giving off the scream of ultimate suffering as Inigo puts it.
Really? Do you
hear that?
I feel that.
Eventually, Inigo and Fezzik find the albino and eventually find the dead Wesley. They've only got one option at this point, and that's taking him to Miracle Max to have a chance to bring him back to life. Now, remember how I said before that the albino makes things a little harder to take seriously? We get the same here with Max. In fact, Max, the albino, and the Pope we meet later on all feel like they'd be more at home in a Mel Brooks film, each of them acting just outside the normal roles that you normally play, given odd little quirks to make them funny. None of these characters break the movie by themselves, but I couldn't help but notice just how out of place they felt compared to the rest of the cast. It's even funnier when you consider that Cary Elwes would go on to play the lead role in Mel Brooks' Robin Hood Men in Tights movie later on. We eventually round everything out with Inigo killing the six-fingered man, complete with probably one of the most quoted lines from the entire movie.
Hello! My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die.
And the eventual defeat of Prince Humperdinck, being threatened so much by someone he thought was dead that he gets to be tied down by Buttercup. And for all the action and excitement this movie has given us at this point, it's actually got a rather subdued ending. So many films have these massive budget-defining sequences at the end of their films, but like the rest of the movie, The Princess Bride ends with our heroes leaving the villain alive, wincing from his defeat as they ride off into the sunset. The final scene of the movie is Grandpa Columbo wishing his grandson goodnight, patting himself in that old Columbo way, before the kid asks him to come back and read the story again tomorrow.
As you wish.
As a film, The Princess Bride did alright when it first released. Not fantastic, but it didn't crash and burn like so many other films have. It was well enjoyed, and many of the actors and staff involved with it mentioned that it was among their favorite roles. In fact, Andre the Giant was well known for saying that he loved sharing this film with his peers in wrestling, and that it was among the few jobs he had ever worked in that he didn't feel like a freak, with everyone just treating him like a coworker. Since then, the movie has gone on to become well loved by many. Part of this is simply for the fact that, like myself, a lot of people grew up with this film, but it's lived on beyond even that. Classic moments from the film, quoted bits like inconceivable and select scenes of the movie have become part of internet culture. There are probably a lot of people from the generations after me who have no idea where these scenes have come from, but know them by heart because they were used online as a joke or a reference. But the best part of the film really just comes down to the fact that it's a wonderful, if simple, story that's told well. Like how Grandpa Columbo says, The Princess Bride has fencing, fighting, torture, revenge, giants, monsters, chases, escapes, true love. It's got a whole bunch of elements that are just enough to catch your attention while giving us enough to care about our characters to hope that they get through to the end. We're very much the same as the kid in this film, perhaps a little dismissive at first of the book before we really start diving into the little bits that start catching on to us. It's a wonderfully feel-good movie, one where you can just sit back and enjoy as you wish. With all that said, I hope I've done a good job to entertain you, and I'll do my best to do so again in the future. Hopefully you'll follow along with my content by subscribing and doing all the other things that gives us YouTubers life. If you wish to support me a bit more, I do have a Patreon where you can get access to bonus content. But until next time, stay frosty.